On the morning after Christmas, 1996, a mother walked down the stairs of her sprawling Boulder, Colorado home and found something that would launch America's most infamous true crime obsession. It wasn't her 6-year-old daughter's body. Not yet. It was a 3-page letter, a ransom note so bizarrely long and theatrical that even Hollywood screenwriters would say, hey, maybe dial it back a bit. I'm your host, Shay, and this is the Evidence Locker. Today, we're unlocking the file on a case that's been theorized, dramatized, and memified for nearly 3 decades. But underneath the tabloid covers and Twitter threads is a real little girl, a genuinely bungled investigation, and a mystery that somehow gets weirder the deeper you dig. Grab your flashlights, folks. Metaphorically, of course. Unless you're one of those people who listens to true crime in a blanket fort. No judgment. We're about to spend 40 minutes inside the Ramsey house on December 26th, 1996. Let's set the scene. It's Boxing Day morning in Boulder. Snow on the ground, that post-Christmas haze where everyone's eaten way too much and the kids are up at dawn to play with new toys. Except in the Ramsey household. Something is very, very wrong. At approximately 5:52 a.m., Patsy Ramsey makes a frantic 911 call. She's found a ransom note on the spiral staircase. The dispatcher can barely make out her words through the sobbing. There's a note left, and our daughter is gone, Patsy cries. JonBenét is missing. Now, here's our first what the actual hell moment of the day. The ransom note. And I need you to understand just how bananas this thing is. It's not a quick, we have your kid, give us money. Oh no, this is a 3-page manifesto. It references a small foreign faction, quotes movie lines, and demands exactly $118,000. That number is weirdly specific, right? Well, it turns out that's almost exactly the amount of John Ramsey's Christmas bonus that year. The note is written on paper from a notepad inside the house, with a pen from the house. The kidnapper apparently broke in, took the time to write a novella, but brought nothing? Not even their own stationery? That's like a hitman showing up and borrowing the victim's gun. The Boulder police arrive within minutes, and here's where things start to go off the rails. Fast. Instead of treating this as a potential homicide and securing the crime scene, they treat it like a kidnapping. Friends and family are allowed to come and go freely. People are cleaning surfaces in the kitchen. Patsy's sister even shows up and improperly assesses the crime scene. The house becomes a contamination nightmare. If this was a cooking show, Gordon Ramsay would be screaming about cross-contamination. Detective Linda Arndt is now essentially babysitting the Ramseys and their friends. The note promised a call between 8 and 10 a.m., instructing them where to deliver the ransom. That call never comes. The Ramseys don't seem particularly concerned about the missed deadline. Police start getting suspicious. Wouldn't you be? If you thought your kid was with kidnappers and they missed their own deadline, you'd be losing your mind. The Ramseys are oddly calm. At 1 p.m., Detective Arndt asked John Ramsey and family friend Fleet White to search the house for anything unusual. John heads straight for the basement. He opens a latched door that Officer French had apparently overlooked earlier, and there she is. JonBenét's body is in a small room in the basement. Her mouth is covered with duct tape. There's a nylon cord around her wrists and neck. Her torso is covered by a white blanket. John picks her up, carries her upstairs, removes the duct tape, and places her on the floor. He covers her with a throw blanket. In that moment, he's destroying evidence. But also, what parent wouldn't? This is the central tragedy of this case. Everything that makes sense emotionally contaminates the investigation. Everything that makes sense forensically feels inhuman. The official cause of death: asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. Translation: she was strangled with a garrote made from one of her mother's paintbrushes and also had an 8.5-inch skull fracture. The autopsy finds pineapple in her stomach, which is weird because her parents said she went straight to bed. But here's the kicker. There's a bowl of pineapple on the kitchen counter with Burke Ramsey's fingerprints on it. So now we have our cast of characters and our crime scene. A dead 6-year-old, a bizarrely staged scene, compromised evidence, and a family acting not the way we think they should. This is where the theories explode into 1,000 different directions, and buckle up, because some of them are absolutely wild. Let's break down the major suspects and theories, because this case has more angles than the geometry textbook. Theory 1. The family did it. This is where most people land, at least initially, and honestly, I get it. Statistically, when a child is murdered, it's usually a family member. The evidence seems to point inward. No forced entry, the ransom note written on house materials, the amount matching John's bonus, the garrote made from Patsy's paintbrush. If you're a detective, you start here. The most popular version of this theory is the bedwetting rage scenario. The theory goes, Patsy, exhausted from Christmas festivities, discovers JonBenét has wet the bed again. In a moment of frustration, she strikes JonBenét, causing the head injury. Then, thinking her daughter is dead or dying, she stages the strangulation and ransom note to make it look like an intruder. But here's the problem. The autopsy shows JonBenét was alive while being strangled. There was hemorrhaging in her eyes and heart, which means her heart was still beating during the strangulation. So if this was staged after an accidental head blow, Patsy would have had to strangle her living daughter to death. That's a hell of a leap from I was mad about bedwetting to I'm going to construct a garrote and finish the job. Also, Patsy's handwriting was analyzed. Some experts saw similarities to the ransom note, but it's never been conclusive. The Boulder District Attorney's Office even said in 2008 that the weight of the evidence is more consistent with the theory that an intruder murdered JonBenét than it is with the theory that Miss Ramsey did it. But here's where it gets spicy. In 1999, a grand jury actually voted to indict both Patsy and John for child abuse resulting in death. The district attorney refused to sign the indictment, citing insufficient evidence. That indictment stayed sealed for over a decade, and when it came out, everyone was shocked. The theories about John are darker. Some speculated he was sexually abusing JonBenét and killed her to cover it up. The autopsy did show signs of prior sexual trauma, though her pediatrician denied any history of abuse. John was also criticized for his behavior that day, calling his pilot twice, making plans to fly to Atlanta. He found the body almost immediately when asked to search. Some investigators believe he knew exactly where to look. But here's the thing. Lou Smith, the legendary homicide detective brought in to help, interviewed John and came away convinced of his innocence. Smith said John was very, very sincere, and the DNA evidence, more on that in a minute, doesn't match John at all. Now, this is the theory that got CBS sued for $750 million. Burke was 9 years old at the time. The theory, popularized by a 2016 CBS docuseries, goes, Burke is eating pineapple in the kitchen. JonBenét sneaks a piece. Burke, in a fit of sibling rage, grabs a flashlight and whacks her over the head. The parents discover she's seriously injured, and knowing Burke could be taken away, stage the whole kidnapping scenario to protect their son. There are some weird details that fuel this theory. Burke had a history of behavioral issues. The housekeeper claimed he had defecated in JonBenét's bed once. There's evidence of prior head injuries to JonBenét that could suggest sibling violence. And Burke's behavior in his later Dr. Phil interview was odd. He smiled while talking about his sister's death, which is admittedly strange, but also could be just nervous effect. I mean, his entire life practically ended when he was 9. He isn't going to have the best social skills. But here's where this theory falls apart for me. The violence level. That skull fracture was massive. It takes significant force to crack a skull like that. Could a 9-year-old swing a flashlight hard enough? Maybe. But could that same 9-year-old then keep his secret for nearly 30 years with no one cracking? No confession, no deathbed admission from Patsy, nothing. That requires a level of family cohesion that seems inconceivable. Also, Burke Ramsey sued CBS and settled for an undisclosed amount. If he did commit the murder, that's some impressive legal audacity. Theory 2. The intruder. This is the theory that Lou Smith, the detective with a 90% homicide solve rate, became convinced of. Let's look at the evidence. First, there was actual literal DNA from an unknown male found on JonBenét's underwear and under her fingernails. In 2003, the DA's office formally cleared the Ramseys after touch DNA analysis excluded any family members. Mary Lacey, the DA, even wrote them a public letter of apology in 2008. Second, the basement window. Lou Smith found evidence that someone entered through there. There were scuff marks on the wall and leaves and debris tracked inside. Critics point out there was an intact cobweb over the window grate, but Smith argued that doesn't prove anything. Spiders rebuild webs quickly. Third, stun gun marks. On JonBenét's body, there were marks that some experts identified as consistent with a stun gun. If an intruder used a stun gun to subdue her, that explains why there might not have been a huge, loud, audible struggle. Fourth, unidentified boot print in the basement room where JonBenét was found. None of the Ramseys' shoes matched it. The intruder theory suggests someone entered while the family was at a Christmas party, wrote the ransom note using materials found in the house, because waiting with a note is riskier than using what's there, and killed JonBenét either as part of a botched kidnapping or a sexual assault that went too far. John Ramsey himself believes the killer was a masked intruder who had raped another girl in Boulder 9 months later. The suspect's name has never been released publicly. Let us go through some of the more popular suspects that have been brought to public attention. John Mark Carr. In August 2006, America thought the case was solved. The killer was in handcuffs, cameras flashing, a confession spilling out. The man responsible for JonBenét's death was a 41-year-old school teacher with a soft voice, a disturbing email habit, and a name that would become synonymous with false confessions, John Mark Carr. For a brief, blazing moment, the world believed it. And then, it all fell apart. But here's the question I keep coming back to, the one that won't leave me alone. If he didn't kill JonBenét, how did he know things that only the killer, or someone very close to the investigation, could possibly know? Before he was Dax's, before he was America's most famous false confessor, John Mark Carr was a substitute teacher from Georgia with a history that should have raised red flags. In 2001, he was arrested in Sonoma County, California, on child pornography charges. Before he could be prosecuted, he fled the country, landing in Bangkok, Thailand. There, he reinvented himself as an international teacher, moving between schools in South Korea, Honduras, Costa Rica, the Netherlands, and finally back to Bangkok. This was a man who, by all accounts, had a deep and troubling sexual fixation on young children. But he was also, by his own admission, intelligent, articulate, and charismatic. The kind of person who could talk his way into trusting relationships. In 2002, 5 years before his confession, Carr began communicating with Michael Tracy, a journalism professor at the University of Colorado who is making a documentary about the JonBenét case. At first, Carr was just another amateur sleuth with theories, but over time, his emails became darker, more detailed, more personal. From 2002 to 2006, Tracy received hundreds of emails and phone calls from someone using the alias Daxus. At first, Tracy was skeptical, but Carr kept providing details that weren't publicly known. He knew JonBenét's nickname for her grandmother, which had never been reported anywhere. He knew specific details about the crime scene that only someone who had studied the case obsessively or had been there could know. He claimed to Tracy that he had sexually abused JonBenét more than once before accidentally killing her. Here's the chilling part. Carr didn't just want to confess, he wanted to apologize. Specifically, he wanted to apologize to Patsy Ramsey. Knowing she was dying of ovarian cancer, investigators set up a phone tap by Patsy's bedside, waiting for Daxus to call. He never did. Patsy died in June 2006, never hearing the apology her husband calls preposterous in police interrogation tapes. The break came when Carr, in his emails, seemed to threaten returning to the Ramsey home. Tracy, fearing for the family's safety, turned everything over to then Boulder DA Lacey. Authorities traced Carr back to Bangkok, where he had been arrested for unrelated charges. They set a trap. They offered Daxus the last original printed photograph of JonBenét. When he agreed to retrieve it from a UPS location in Bangkok, they had him. On August 15, 2006, John Mark Carr was arrested in Bangkok. The press conference was international news. With cameras flashing, Carr confessed to the crime in graphic, sexual detail. He described JonBenét's death as an accident that occurred during a so-called love game. In one dramatic account, the ransom note excerpt read, "Close your pretty eyes, sweetheart. Daxus loves you so much. Oh God, I love you, JonBenét, and my lover's eyes are slowly closing." In interviews, Carr said her death was an accident, that he was very sorry for what happened to JonBenét, and that he was not a monster. He was extradited to the U.S., flown to Boulder, and held for questioning. The media called it a breakthrough. The Ramseys issued a statement. The public breathed a sigh of relief. For 3 days, the case was solved. Then, within 48 hours of his arrival in Boulder, the case disintegrated faster than wet tissue paper. First, the DNA. Carr's DNA was compared to the unknown male DNA found on JonBenét's underwear and waistband. It didn't match, not even close. Second, the alibi. Carr's estranged wife told investigators that he was in North Carolina with their family on December 25th and 26th of 1996. She provided specific details. The timeline didn't add up. Third, the details. Carr claimed he drugged JonBenét before assaulting her. The autopsy found no drugs in her system. Fourth, the so-called inside knowledge. Carr had provided details that were already public or easily found in online forums. The one or two things he knew that weren't publicly released could have been obtained from case files or through obsessive research. By August 25, 2006, just 13 days after his arrest, the DA's office announced that Carr would not be charged. The child pornography charges from Sonoma County were eventually dismissed due to a paperwork technicality. Charges against Carr were dropped. He was a free man. But here's where it gets weird again. In May 2024, Carr spoke out publicly. He claimed he was not crazy and not a liar. He doubled down. I was with JonBenét when she died. I was not the person who caused it. He suggested he might have been protecting someone. I know the truth, he said, but no one will listen. In audio recordings played in the Netflix documentary, Carr denied stalking the Ramsey family. But John Ramsey himself recalled that their housekeeper in Michigan told him she was 100% certain that Carr was in their Michigan home asking questions, leading John to believe he was in fact stalking the family. In the documentary, Carr claimed to live a very covert life outside the U.S. and hasn't been convicted of any crimes against children. But he's also now living as a woman named Alexis Reich in the Pacific Northwest, according to a 2010 report by the Daily Beast. Why did he know so much? This is the question that haunts this case. Tracy insists that Carr knew things that were never public. JonBenét's nickname for her grandmother, details about the crime scene layout, the fact that the ransom note was written in smaller than standard notebook paper. How did he know? Here are the possibilities. Option A, he was there. He did it. The DNA is either contaminated or from someone else, an accomplice, a second intruder. Option B, he studied the case obsessively for years, found details in court documents, interviews, or early internet forums that weren't widely known. Option C, he had contact with someone who was involved and he's protecting them. Option D, he's a delusional fanatic who convinced himself he was there and his memory is confabulated. Gary Oliva. Next, I want to tell you about a phone call that came from a payphone in Boulder, Colorado on December 26, 1996. It was a call that should have changed everything. It was a confession, and the guy who received it has been trying to get anyone to listen for 28 years. This is the story of Gary Oliva, and why some people think the killer was a homeless drifter obsessed with JonBenét, while others think he's a broken man with a broken mind confessing to a crime that he didn't commit. Gary Oliva was a 32-year-old convicted sex offender when JonBenét died. He had already sexually assaulted a 7-year-old girl in Oregon in 1991, then fled and ended up as a transient in Boulder. He was living within 10 blocks of the Ramsey home, staying at a homeless shelter. He was in the area, on and off, when the murder happened, and he had a history that mirrors aspects of the crime. In 1991, he tried to strangle his own mother with a telephone cord. The garrote used on JonBenét was strangulation with a cord. That's not nothing. But it gets weirder. In December 2000, 4 years after the murder, Oliva was arrested on unrelated drug charges. In his backpack, police found a stun gun, multiple photographs of JonBenét, and a poem about her called Ode to JonBenét. Let me say that again. 4 years after the murder, this man was carrying a stun gun and photos of the dead little girl. Lou Smith, the detective who believed in the intruder theory, noted that stun gun marks were found on JonBenét's body. Oliva's own mother described him as always an odd guy with a rough childhood. His one consistent friend was Michael Vale, a former music publicist who had known Oliva since high school. On December 26, 1996, the night of the murder, Oliva called Michael Vale from a Boulder payphone. Vale says Oliva was sobbing so hard that he was hyperventilating. "I've never heard anyone sob like that," Vale recalled. "It was terrifying." In that call, Oliva allegedly said, "I heard a little girl. I heard a little girl." Vale immediately called the Boulder Police Department tip line. Then he waited for the arrest that never came. 3 months later, Vale called again. Still nothing. Vale says he was never interviewed by police, though former DA Alex Hunter did drive to California in 2002 to collect a box of cassette tapes and drawings Vale had saved. On those tapes, Oliva had recorded audio letters. While Vale's were light and funny, Oliva's were increasingly disturbing and dark. He talked about cooking children in bone broth, making bacon strips out of a little girl's flesh, and sometimes the tapes appeared to be written on in blood. But it was the letters from prison over the past decade that became even more explicit. Oliva wrote to Vale, "I never loved anyone like I did JonBenét, and yet I let her slip and her head bashed in half and I watched her die. It was an accident. Please believe me. She was not like the other kids." In another letter, above a hand-drawn picture of JonBenét, he wrote, "You split me, tore my heart open, filled me with love. You poured your spirit into me. I knew you as myself." During a 2024 prison visit, Vale says Oliva showed him a shrine he had built to JonBenét. Oliva told Vale he worshipped her and wanted to eat her. He also told Vale he was blackout under a bridge drunk that night and couldn't recall details, but still acknowledged responsibility. This wasn't a passing interest. In 2016, when Oliva was arrested for child pornography, police found 22 explicit images of girls between ages 4 and 7, plus 335 photos of JonBenét on his phone. Not 3, not 30, 335. He was sentenced to 10 years for child pornography and released in January 2024 after serving 8. He is currently on probation with a projected discharge date of August 12, 2026. This is where the case gets interesting. Private investigator Jason Jensen, who works with Michael Vale, argues that modern investigations have become too reliant on DNA. He calls it the CSI effect. Sometimes we want scientific level proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and we discard other types of evidence. Jensen questions whether the DNA found even belongs to the killer. Could it be contamination from the manufacturing process? Could it be from the paintbrush handle? Could it be unrelated, contaminated DNA that was on the paintbrush before it was used? After all, we're talking about touch DNA, a degraded sample from the 1990s. Jensen points out that all of us seem to know the ransom note was written on smaller notebook paper. How would he know that unless he was there? This is the type of subjective evidence that Jensen and Vale believe deserves careful consideration. Gary Oliva was released from prison in January 2024. By November 2024, he had reportedly fallen off the radar of officials. Michael Vale, his former friend, is terrified. "There's an expiration date," Vale said. "That ankle bracelet will be coming off. If he hurts another child, I won't be able to live with myself." In March 2024, Vale and Jensen took their evidence, letters, recordings, handwriting analysis, to Boulder police. Both felt the detectives took them seriously. Detective Stephen Redfern, the current lead, has said the department is open to any possibilities. But here's the reality. Boulder PD has processed over 1,500 pieces of evidence, followed up on 21,016 tips, analyzed 1,000 DNA samples, and interviewed over 1,000 individuals across 19 states. They haven't made an arrest. The Gary Oliva theory is the perfect encapsulation of why this case is so maddening. On paper, he looks perfect. He's a convicted pedophile who lived nearby, confessed multiple times, obsessed over the victim, possessed a stun gun, and has handwriting that might match the ransom note. If this were a movie, he'd be the killer. Case closed. But the DNA doesn't match. And in 2024, DNA is supposed to be the gold standard. So we have two competing truths. Either Gary Oliva is guilty and the DNA is either contaminated or belongs to someone else who was there, perhaps an accomplice, or Gary Oliva is a mentally ill man who formed a delusional attachment to a famous murder victim and has been seeking attention or punishment for decades. Both are possible. Both have precedent. Here's what I find most compelling. Michael Vale. He's not a glory seeker. He's a retired music publicist who has spent 28 years trying to get police to take his childhood friend's confession seriously. He didn't go to the media for money. He went because he believes there's an expiration date, and that ankle monitor is coming off. Michael Helgoth. 2 days. That's all the time that passed between a press conference where the Boulder District Attorney announced they were zeroing in on a suspect, and the moment a 26-year-old electrician was found dead in his bed, a bullet through his skull. 2 days. Now, if you're writing a crime novel, that's a hell of a coincidence. If you're a real detective, that coincidence is either a smoking gun or a massive red herring. This is the story of Michael Helgoth, the man who died just as the investigation was tightening its focus, leaving behind a trail of evidence that fits the crime like a glove that doesn't quite have his fingerprints in it. Michael Helgoth was a 26-year-old electrician who worked at an auto salvage yard near the Ramsey home. He wasn't some shady drifter from out of state. He was local. He had a job. He wore high-tech boots to work, and apparently he had a reputation. Private investigator Ollie Gray, who was hired by the Ramsey family to look into the case, described Helgoth as a hellraiser who might have been tied to an alleged property dispute with the Ramseys. Now, I'm not sure what a hellraiser means in Boulder, Colorado in the mid-90s, but I'm picturing someone who drinks Coors Light for breakfast and has a collection of knives he definitely shouldn't have. But here's where it gets interesting. Helgoth had access to the Ramsey neighborhood. He worked nearby. He had boots that matched a footprint found in the basement where the body was discovered. And he owned a stun gun. Let's walk through what made investigators look at Helgoth seriously. First, the boot print. In the basement room where JonBenét was found, there was an unidentified boot print. It didn't match any Ramsey family shoes, and according to sources, Helgoth owned a pair of high-tech boots that appeared to match it. Trip Demuth, one of the original prosecutors on the case, told CNN there were suspicious things about Helgoth. He owned shoes that matched the mysterious footprint. He owned a stun gun. and he had a hat with the letters SBTC, which matched the signature on the ransom note. SBTC. That's not just a coincidence. That's a full-on, are you serious level of coincidence. Second, the stun gun. Lou Smith, who found marks on JonBenét's body that he believed were from a stun gun, as previously said, knew Helgoth had one. He had means, opportunity, and if you believe the property dispute story, a possible motive for revenge against the Ramsey family. Third, the money. This is the detail that makes you sit up straight. Helgoth allegedly told a friend he and a business partner would be making between $50,000 and $80,000 around the time of the murder. The ransom note demanded $118,000, close to that range, but not exact. Some theorists have suggested Helgoth was part of a two-man team, and the ransom was supposed to be split. Fourth, the behavior. Gray alleged that Helgoth's family owned a taped confession of his guilt. Now, I've never seen that tape. No one has. But the rumor alone adds to the cloud of suspicion. Here's where the Helgoth theory goes from interesting suspect to conspiracy theory catnip. On January 14th, 1997, the Boulder District Attorney's Office held a press conference. They announced that they had narrowed down a list of suspects. They were getting close. 2 days later, Michael Helgoth was found dead in his bed from a single gunshot wound. The official ruling? Suicide. But Ollie Gray, the Ramseys' private investigator, thought it was suspicious. Why? Because Helgoth was right-handed, but the trajectory of the bullet went from left to right. Gray told Inside Edition in 2016, "I think it's worth following up on," and he's not alone in that suspicion. The timing is exquisite. A suspect who fits the physical evidence, who has a stun gun and a SBTC hat, who allegedly bragged about a big payday, dies 2 days after police say they're closing in. That's either the unluckiest coincidence in true crime history, or Helgoth was taken out by an accomplice or killed himself because he knew the net was tightening. But let's pump the brakes, because the Helgoth theory has more holes than a fishing net. First, the DNA. Helgoth's DNA didn't match the unknown male DNA found on JonBenét's clothing. That's a big problem. If he was there, sexually assaulting her, strangling her, his DNA should be everywhere. It's not. Second, the motive. The alleged property dispute with the Ramseys has never been substantiated. No one can point to a specific conflict, a specific piece of property, a specific grudge. It's rumor built on rumor. Third, the confession tape. If Helgoth's family had a taped confession, why didn't Gray produce it? Why hasn't it surfaced in 28 years? That's the kind of smoking gun that would crack the case wide open. Its absence is deafening. Fourth, the police say that he was never a serious suspect. Boulder authorities told the New York Post that Helgoth has never been considered a serious suspect, and that his DNA didn't match. They downplay the boot print match and the stun gun connection. Fifth, the accomplice theory. If Helgoth was part of a two-man team, where's the accomplice? No one has ever come forward. No one has been identified. The theory requires a second ghost who has stayed silent for 3 decades. Here's an interesting wrinkle. Ollie Gray was hired by the Ramsey family. His job was to find evidence that pointed away from John, Patsy, and Burke. So it's in his interest to find a viable suspect like Helgoth. Does that make him biased? Maybe. Does that mean he's wrong? Not necessarily. Gray was a seasoned investigator who had solved murders. He wasn't a crackpot, and he genuinely believed Helgoth was worth looking at. But he also had a client who desperately wanted to be proven innocent. Bill McReynolds. Finally, I want to take you deeper into, in my opinion, one of the strangest corners of this case. A story that feels like it was plucked from a David Lynch film, complete with a jolly fat man in a red suit, a vial of glitter, and a coincidence so eerie it gives me actual goosebumps. Let's talk about Bill McReynolds, better known to the Ramseys as Santa. Bill McReynolds was a 66-year-old retired journalism professor at the University of Colorado, but his passion project, his true calling, was playing Santa Claus. He wasn't just some mall Santa checking his watch for his smoke break. According to multiple sources, McReynolds was the Santa in Boulder. He had a real white beard, a custom-made suit, and a twinkle in his eye that apparently captivated children, including JonBenét Ramsey. The Ramseys hired him to play Santa at their Christmas party for 3 consecutive years, from 1994 to 1996. And in 1996, just 2 days before JonBenét was murdered, McReynolds was in their home, ho-ho-hoing in their living room, surrounded by family and friends. Now, here's where it starts to get weird. According to Patsy Ramsey's book, Death of Innocence, McReynolds specifically requested that the Ramseys host a Christmas party in 1996 because he was filming a segment for CBS anchor Charles Kurt's news show and wanted JonBenét and her family to become a part of it. So he had a professional reason to be there, but also a personal one. Multiple witnesses described his relationship with JonBenét as special. His wife, Janet McReynolds, later said he had chosen JonBenét to be his special friend. That's a phrase that immediately raises red flags, though context matters. Santa says that to lots of kids, but the way he seemed to fixate on her felt different. Let's talk about the glitter, because this detail is both incredibly sweet and deeply unsettling. According to Janet McReynolds, JonBenét gave her husband a vial of gold glitter as a gift. Bill McReynolds treasured this vial so much that he allegedly took it with him into heart surgery. His wife claimed he had asked her to mix the gold glitter in with his ashes if he died. That's how much this small gesture meant to him. On one hand, it's a touching story about a man who loved children and appreciated small kindnesses. On the other hand, it's a grown man developing an almost fetish attachment to a gift from a 6-year-old girl he's about to see murdered 2 days later. The cognitive dissonance here is intense. At that final Christmas party, McReynolds gave JonBenét a card. This is where the story really splits into Santa's a sweet old man versus Santa might be a predator. According to Lawrence Schiller's book, Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, the card contained a handwritten note. You will receive a very special gift after Christmas. Now, investigators and suspicious family friends immediately pounced on this. After Christmas, like December 26th, the day she's murdered, that's a hell of a coincidence. But here's what we don't know. Was this a generic Santa will bring gifts after Christmas message he gave all the kids? Was it referencing the film segment, or was it something more sinister? This is where the timeline gets genuinely disturbing. Just days before her murder, JonBenét told a family friend, Barbara Kostanek, about Santa's plans. According to Kostanek, JonBenét said, Santa promised to come visit me after Christmas. She emphasized, as a 6-year-old would, that the visit was after Christmas and that it was supposed to be a secret. Again, this could be completely innocent. Children misinterpret things. Maybe McReynolds told her he'd come see her at her pageant after Christmas. Maybe he was role-playing that Santa visits houses after Christmas to check on kids. But in the context of what happened, it sounds like a child being groomed, being told to keep a secret about an adult's special attention. This is the detail that made even hardened investigators do a double take. As a child, Bill McReynolds' own daughter, Jill, was abducted along with her best friend on December 26, 1974, exactly 22 years to the day before JonBenét's murder. During that 1974 incident, the friend was sexually assaulted. The perpetrator was never caught. This isn't just a weird coincidence. It's a pattern that makes you want to scream into the void. Why would a man whose own daughter was victim to a violent crime on that exact date become a suspect in an identical crime 22 years later? Either it's a horrific cosmic joke, or it suggests a deeply disturbed individual reenacting trauma. Or, and this is what the family argues, it's just a sad, random coincidence that makes a sweet old man look guilty as hell. Boulder police investigated McReynolds thoroughly in the early days. He was interviewed multiple times. He gave handwriting samples, hair samples, blood samples. He cooperated fully. He had an alibi for the night of the murder. He claimed he was miles away with his family. Specifically, he said he was at home with his wife and son, far from the Ramsey home. And crucially, his DNA did not match the unknown male DNA found on JonBenét's clothing. That alone should have cleared him completely. Yet, investigators found aspects of his behavior deeply suspicious. He seemed to have a photographic memory of the Ramsey home's layout. JonBenet had personally given him a tour of the house at one point, which explained that, but it still felt weird. He kept photos of JonBenet. After her murder, he spoke about her in an almost reverent tone. In his 2002 interview with CBS, McReynolds was defensive, but maintained his innocence. This is a detail that rarely gets mentioned in mainstream coverage. In the Netflix docuseries Cold Case: Who Killed JonBenét Ramsey, investigative journalists Joyce and Stephen Singular interviewed other mothers from JonBenét's pageant circuit. According to the Singulars, multiple mothers said that Randy Simmons, who is a separate suspect, but also that McReynolds had borderline inappropriate photos of young girls on the walls of their studio. They were quick to specify these weren't pornographic, but the implication was that his interest in young girls went beyond professional pageant photography. The mothers also reported that after the murder, McReynolds called them insistently to say that he had not killed JonBenet, even though no one had yet accused him. That's odd behavior. It's either the actions of a man who knows he's being talked about, or it's someone with a guilty conscience. Bill McReynolds died in 2002 of a heart attack. He was never charged. His daughter Jill has given interviews defending him, describing him as a kind, loving man who just believed in magic. She frames the accusations as character assassination of a sweet old man who loved bringing joy to children. And maybe she's right. Maybe he was just a gentle soul caught in a nightmare of coincidences. But that's the problem with this case. Every piece of evidence comes with a shadow of doubt. Here's what makes me hesitate to fully clear McReynolds, even with the DNA mismatch. We know the DNA found on JonBenet was minimal, possibly degraded. In 2023, a new handwriting analysis suggested Gary Oliva was very likely the author of the ransom note. So what if McReynolds was involved, but Oliva wrote the note? What if there were multiple people? The note references a small foreign faction and uses plural pronouns. Could McReynolds have been the familiar face who gained access, while someone else committed the murder? But then we're getting into conspiracy theory territory, and I try to avoid that unless the evidence demands it. Look, I don't want to be the person who assassinates the character of a dead man who can't defend himself. But I also can't ignore that this case is built on weird coincidences and suspicious behavior that might mean nothing. The McReynolds theory is like a ghost story. It makes no logical sense. but so specific and creepy that it haunts you. A Santa Claus, a vial of glitter, a card promising a special gift, a daughter abducted 22 years earlier. It's either the most tragically unlucky set of coincidences ever visited upon an innocent man, or it's one of those rare cases where the truth really is stranger than fiction. The list goes on. There's a secret spreadsheet compiled by Lou Smith before he died in 2010. It has over 600 lines of investigation, dozens of suspects. His daughter and a team of investigators are still working through it, eliminating people via DNA testing. They've cleared about 25 people so far. So where does this leave us? With a bunch of conflicting evidence, bungled police work, and a case that's become a test for what you believe about human nature. Let's talk about that DNA for a second, because it's both the strongest evidence for an intruder and the most frustrating piece of the puzzle. In 2008, Boulder DA Mary Lacey announced that new touch DNA testing had found genetic material from an unknown male on JonBenét's waistband of her long johns. This was addition to DNA found on her underwear years earlier. The profile was entered into CODIS, the FBI's DNA database, but got no hits. In 2016, more sensitive testing revealed the DNA might be from 2 people, not just one, which complicates everything further. Some experts argue the DNA could be from manufacturing contamination. Others say it's definitive proof of an intruder. The truth is, DNA can transfer in weird ways. We shed skin cells constantly. A factory worker in Bangladesh could have touched that underwear during packaging, but the DNA under her fingernails, that's harder to explain away. Here's what I keep coming back to. The ransom note. It's the weirdest damn piece of evidence in this whole weird case. 3 pages, movie quotes, details about John's bonus, and the phrase SBTC at the end. What does that even mean? Saved by the Cross? Some random initials? Santa Barbara Tennis Club? The internet has theories. I mean, of course it does. If an intruder wrote it, why include the exact bonus amount? To throw suspicion on the parents? That's next level criminal cunning. If Patsy wrote it, why make it 3 pages? Why include all those weird details that make it look fake? A staging criminal would write a convincing note. This note is like a 9th grader trying to sound like a terrorist. It makes no sense either way, but I mean, that sums up the whole case. None of it makes sense. In recent years, there have been some interesting developments. The 2024 Netflix docuseries Cold Case: Who Killed JonBenét Ramsey tries to make the intruder case, interviewing Lou Smith's family and pointing to failures in the initial investigation. John Ramsey, now 81, is still advocating for more DNA testing. He believes genetic genealogy, the technique that caught the Golden State Killer, could solve this case. A cold case review team in Colorado is re-examining everything. They've digitized over 21,000 tips, 1,000 interviews, and DNA from 200 people. Lou Smith's daughter Cindy is working through her father's spreadsheet, trying to eliminate suspects. But here's the depressing reality. It's been 28 years. Witnesses have died. Evidence has degraded. Memories have faded. The Boulder Police Department has processed over 1,500 pieces of evidence and followed up on over 20,000 tips, and still, nothing. I want to end by bringing this back to what actually matters, because it's easy to get caught up in the theories, the evidence, the did they or didn't they. But JonBenét Ramsey was a real little girl. She was 6 years old. She liked to wear a yellow bracelet with her name on it. She had a heart drawn on her left hand in red ink. She was the spark plug of her family, full of zest and energy. Someone took that away. Whether it was a family member who snapped, a pedophile who broke in, or some other scenario we've never considered, a 6-year-old child suffered a brutal, terrifying death. She was strangled with a device made from her mother's art supplies. She was hit so hard, her skull fractured. She deserves justice, and her family, whether they were involved or not, has lived under this cloud for nearly 3 decades. Jon Ramsey says solving the case isn't going to change my life at this point, but it will change the lives of my family and my grandchildren. He just wants the cloud removed from his family's head. Maybe the DNA will finally hit in a database. Maybe someone on Lou Smith's spreadsheet will finally make a deathbed confession. Maybe some kid doing genealogy will be horrified to discover their uncle is in fact a murderer. Or maybe this stays in the realm of the unsolved forever. A case so messy and compromised that we never get answers. I wish I could end this with a clever hook or a definitive conclusion, but the evidence doesn't allow it. The evidence just is. And after 28 years, it's still locked away, waiting for the right key. If you have information about the JonBenét Ramsey case, you can contact the Boulder Police Department at 303-441-1974 or email bouldersmostwanted@bouldercolorado.gov. For transcripts, sources, and additional reading on this episode, visit our website at the Evidence Locker Pod on Pod page. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps weirdos like me keep making content about even weirder true crime cases. This podcast is written and hosted by me, Shay, and edited by my husband, Toby. This has been The Evidence Locker. I'll see you next time. Stay curious, stay safe. Join us next week as we open another locker.